What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will. We are checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me today, as he does each and every time, my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Manakis. What's going on, man?
What's good, bro? Just had some pancakes ready to go.
Let's go. A little pancake. We're recording this on a Monday morning here. We decided to give our guy, part of the three-man weave, Adam Taylor, the day off. We were debating between recording yesterday or this morning, but happy Father's Day to our guy, Adam. So we gave him the day off for this podcast. So it's just me and Greg. So this is a Monday morning flapjack special. Monday morning on some flapjacks here. It's pretty early. Get up, make some pancakes here on a Monday.
I had a great morning. My meeting at 7 a.m. didn't show, right? So I didn't have to deal with an
Kind of
awkward
love that.
conversation.
This is the side note. This is, if you're in sales, you'll understand this. There's certain meetings that you set that you feel responsible to show up for, even though you feel like you have maybe a 95% confidence rate that the other person is in no chance showing up. But it allows you to get your day going because you feel like I've got to be here. So now I think this is what's leading to Flapjack Monday.
Exactly. And so I show up at 7 a.m. I sent an email last night just confirming the meeting, didn't get a response. So I was like, all right,
never a good sign.
Pretty good feeling that this person is not showing up to the meeting. Show up to the meeting. I'm on there for 15 minutes. They don't show. So I'm able to go to the park with my dogs, have them run around a little bit, come back. And I got 45 minutes until the pod. And pretty much the only thing that I have in my house right now for food is pancake mix because we need to go grocery shopping today. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to fire up some flapjacks. And it was a great decision. Made it on the griddle. Normally Danielle's the one that's going to make breakfast. If we're going to do pancakes or something like that, I'm normally more of the bacon guy, but I whipped together, whisked the batter together, threw it on the griddle, 3 pancakes later, feeling good, feeling great.
Did you, were these just, plain pancakes? Did you get a little bit creative? Did you toss, you said you're the bacon guy. Did you toss a little bacon in the mix? Did you get a little chocolate chips, little bananas, anything like that? Or we just keep it plain Jane today?
I probably would have thrown something in there, but as I said, we literally don't have any food in the house.
That's true. That's true. That is not a great job of active listening by the host here. that we have nothing in the house, which is why we're doing pancakes this morning. So either way, I'm a little jealous. I'm gonna be honest. I gotta put together some breakfast here. I'm gonna go play some golf after we record this. So I gotta go grab something to eat before that. But while we're here, why don't we just talk a little bit of basketball, Greg? Why don't we talk a little bit about what's going on in the NBA? And, we talked a lot on our last podcast about the potential of Brad Beal being moved as he was in talks with his agents, the Wizards, and trying to find a landing spot. Ultimately, myself, you, and Adam landed on, we don't really want to do this deal for the Celtics. However, you and I got together yesterday and we were talking about, before the deal went official, which we'll talk about here in just a second, what some of the rumored packages were. And I know it changed your mind a little bit, so we'll get there in a second. But Bradley Beal heading to the Phoenix Suns in a package that is not finalized because they may expand it to 3 teams. But for right now, he is heading to the Phoenix Suns in exchange for Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, I think about 5 second-round picks and a couple of pick swaps, which, they're so far down the line. Who knows what happens with those? But potentially, the Wizards are getting 0 first-round picks, and Chris Paul is likely to never wear a Wizards uniform, whether that's they expand this, it goes to a 3rd team, or they complete it, waive him, save some money, or just send him elsewhere. It seems very unlikely he'll play for the Wizards. So back to the point that we were talking about here, Greg. Let's start from a Celtics perspective. Then we'll get into, the Suns, the Wizards, all this. Knowing what we know now and knowing that the other offer, that the Heat, who were the other finalists in this, and that their package was something along the lines of Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson, and a couple of picks, which might have at least been first-round picks. But once again, Bradley Beal, no trade clause, very big part of this, where he can dictate where he wants to go, knowing that these were the packages that were floating around. And we have his best friend, Jason Tatum, on the Celtics. Do you think the Celtics should have gotten more involved with this new information?
I do, straight up. Like we had the contracts to send him out and get Brad Beal back for not much. Like if everyone wants to move Brogdon already, right? That's what everyone's talking about this offseason is we probably need to move on from Malcolm Brogdon. We can get into that conversation later. Like Brogdon, Horford, and Gallinari's contracts get you close to getting Brad Beal on the Celtics. And, Horford, we saw at the end of the season last year, was great, but he needed to be utilized less. And it seems like Al Horford kind of needs to be transitioned into a bench role. So there was a package that you could put together to get Brad Beal on the team. You try it out for a year, see what works. You have the Jaylen Brown extension, you extend Jaylen Brown, and then you can't trade Jaylen for an entire year. So like maybe at the end of season 1, you make a decision like, okay, the Brad Beal thing didn't work. Jaylen was clearly better. Maybe we want Jaylen to stick around. Maybe we move Brad Beal, or Brad Beal and Tatum work really well together. Maybe you move Jaylen Brown. But there was a world in which the Celtics could have got Bradley Beal for pennies, and we didn't even make an offer, which
I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe, but yeah. But
I think it would have come out if the Celtics made an offer.
Most likely, it probably would have. You're probably right on that. But I always like to leave just in case, because we don't know all of these things, obviously. But I mean, I still think for me, I'm glad the Celtics didn't get involved. From a value perspective, it's really hard to not say, hey, that would have made a little sense. You just laid out the case. You're bringing in Brad Beal, who's a 3-time All-Star. I think 2 years ago, averaged 30 points per game. Like that's really valuable. And then when you add in the Jason Tatum aspect of it, of course, there's going to be value there. So from a value perspective, if it could have been, something along the lines of the trade package that you mentioned, maybe, a couple second round picks or whatever little salary filler was needed, a Muscala or whatever to get that over the hump. Yeah, in a vacuum, I think that makes sense. But I think for me, I still would have come back to the contract would have been too prohibitive to just say we can figure it out later. Because one thing that's big that you and I talked about yesterday while we were shooting around and was confirmed, an article by Keith Smith on Spot Track, that no trade clause comes with him. It does not. It does not end because he waived it this one time. It carries with his contract. So to your point, if we can kind of figure it out later, there's not really a figuring it out with Bradley Beal, because once he's with Jason Tatum, I can't imagine JT is going to say, "Yeah, no, let's go and trade my best friend and my mentor." So then at that point, it is Jaylen Brown, which still might be the case anyways. But for me, the roster flexibility is so hindered by this, and that's where I think I look at the Suns, and I think they're in the same position that I said I feel like the Celtics would have been in if they traded for Bradley Beal. Really high floor. I still think the ceiling's a little shaky, especially when you look at, over the last couple of years, Kevin Durant's constantly injured. Devin Booker's been injured as well a few times, especially last season. And Bradley Beal's played 40, 50, and 60 games over the last 3 years. It's not exactly like he's an Iron Man. Like, that's one thing that you can say about the Jays when you look at them is they're available, more often than not. Specifically Tatum and Brown, for the most part, is available. And so when I look at that roster and you add in DeAndre Ayton's contracts, they have really basically like 4 max contracts that are out there. Yes, in a world where they all stay healthy, the Suns are going to be probably pretty good, but they are they have such little room for error, specifically health-wise, which is something that's so out of your control that for me, I don't like the aspect of that. And I think if the Celtics were to make a move like this, I think their depth taking a hit and their ability to maneuver would have been something I would have been against anyway. So I'm cool with the Celtics sitting this out, despite the fact the value proposition was certainly there.
Yeah, a lot of meat on that bone. I think the DeAndre Ayton conversation is a good one to have, because I don't think DeAndre Ayton is long for the Phoenix Suns. I think they move on from DeAndre Ayton. So I would imagine them to try and move Ayton for 2 or 3 pieces to kind of build out that roster a little bit. Because although Ayton does theoretically fit, like they need a big man, right? They need a big man there. They probably could get a big man on the cheap. And because like you don't need DeAndre Ayton to score the basketball when you have Booker, Beal, and Durant, right? So I would imagine they move Ayton for pieces. I haven't done like a deep dive as to what they could get, what teams out there might be interested in Ayton. Maybe it's the Pacers, who are rumored to have interest in him last year. We talked about the Pacers on the last pod. Another thing to think about with the Suns is they're in a little bit of a different situation than the Celtics, right? They're basically at the roulette table, and they put everything on 35. Right. Yeah. All their money's on 35. They lose, and then they go to the ATM machine and they're like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to double down. And that's what they ended up doing. And now they're putting their money on Bradley.
Greg, this sounds like a night you and I have had together in Vegas before, or it just sounds almost way too familiar.
Yeah. When like your initial $20 bet, now you're betting like 1,500 just to win your 20 back. Yeah. That's happened before for sure. And I just think like that the Celtics were in a different position, right? They didn't have to push all their chips in. The Suns kind of did. They have Kevin Durant. You probably got 2 more years of peak Kevin Durant, maybe 1 more year of peak Kevin Durant. And like you have to kind of assume that there's going to be a little bit of a decline in Kevin Durant's game. Devin Booker is probably not enough to make up for whatever Durant is losing percentage wise year by year. But then you add Bradley Beal, who can take a lot of the scoring load off of Booker and off of Durant. I think Beal also is a better playmaker than people give him credit for.
That's fair.
We'll see. We'll see how that fit works out. And then the last thing to consider is that the Suns now are basically in a very similar tax situation to what the Celtics would have been if we got Bradley Beal, right? And it's going to be very prohibitive, especially with DeAndre Ayton's contract. If they don't move off of that, I think they're already at like 160.
So real quick. So this is where they're at right now. And this is like, it's the definition of an all-in move. So the super tax apron is going to be somewhere around 179. With the 4 players we've mentioned, the only other player they have definitively under contract is Cam Payne at around $7 million. That's basically your starting lineup, at least as of right now. Cam Payne plus those 4 other guys. That brings them to about 169 million. So they've got about 9 to 10 roster spots to fill out with $10 million. Now they have some other guys that they can, re-sign and go above the tax and, not just rely on 10 minimum guys, but they're going to be hit with those,
So the new CBA that starts this summer.
So that's why part of why this trade went down now versus I think it starts June 30th. So
I thought it started next June.
No, well, here's the thing. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So it starts June 30th. And I don't know. I'd have to look up an article here on the fly to figure out. But it's like basically over the next 3 years, parts of it start to come.
Gotcha.
In. So this year, and this is where I saw Keith Smith, to mention him again, that had a tweet earlier that he was saying that there's gonna be a lot of GMs talking about there's going to be a lot of moves this year because this is setting yourself because the harshest penalties don't start until I believe 2 years from now. Okay. So it will start to wean itself in as far as, what the penalties are. So this is going to be a year of kind of resetting, of deciding how you're going to approach it. And this was kind of the point that I made on our last show is for the Celtics, and you talked about it right now, why the Celtics didn't have to make this Bradley Beal move. And I think the position the Celtics are in and why I'm not worried about giving Jaylen Brown the supermax and figuring it out with the roster that we have and maneuvering, maybe moving one of the guards or whatever it is because we're going to see a lot of teams make some mistakes. We're going to see a lot of teams that are going to have to be, because they're in a position right now where they have to anticipate how they think the market's going to react, whether that's from trades or free agent signings. And the Celtics are going to have a little bit of a luxury to sit back and see, we don't want to follow that path. We don't want to make this mistake. Or, man, they got to steal with that. That's a model that we need to follow. And maybe that's, whether it's a trade or a signing, the Celtics are going to have, some of the advantage, I think, because their roster is already in a position where they're going to be near the super tax, but any team that's contending is going to be near the super tax. Yeah. So they're going to be in a good spot, in my opinion.
Yeah, when you say that they're already at 169 million, they being the Suns, that just makes me think Ayton's definitely going to be moved because I don't think you can have that
more
much
likely
money tied up in. Because like, how are they going to build out the rest of that roster with $9 million?
Yeah, it's minimums and then re-signing, the Terrence Rosses and the Josh Okogis for a little bit more and just eating that super tax burden at least for the next couple of years. But new owner syndrome. That's where they're going with. Celtics don't quite have that problem, but the Celtics did have a couple of guys that were in some trade rumors. So let's take a quick break and then we'll talk about that. All right, Greg. So you kind of touched on this earlier. You mentioned Malcolm Brogdon as being kind of the hot name thrown around a little bit as to who the Celtics might move on from. There's been reports that, the Celtics are actively shopping, moving, trying to get different types of depth by moving one of the 3 guards or one of the 4 guards. Let's throw Peyton Pritchard in here as well, including Derek White, Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon. Although it seems like Derek White has been also reported as the least likely of those to move. And you and I talked about that. We're certainly on board with Derek White, at least for this offseason, feeling, pretty untouchable. So with Malcolm Brogdon, there was a report that the Suns had some interest. And, I don't know that the Celtics would be interested in DeAndre Ayton, but let's just go there for a minute here, just because, we were just talking about him in the last segment here. And so if you were to once again pile together Malcolm Brogdon plus Al, I mean, that basically that's the deal right there. Or you could go the Gallo, Muscala, Peyton Pritchard, some combination of that. But, with Ayton's contract right around that 33 to 35 million, like it's relatively easy to get there.
Mhm.
Do you see Brogdon being somebody? I mean, do you think Brogdon's going to get moved this offseason? Let's start there, and then we can start talking about maybe targets.
I do. I think some of Brogdon's comments towards the end of the year kind of implied that he didn't enjoy 100% his time in Boston this year. And he didn't really like playing for Joe, seemingly. That's what it seemed like. So, like, maybe that relationship is already a little bit frayed. If you're going to keep your core together, Brogdon's to get kind of the outsider looking in, so you might as well move off of him, right? And you also got the most healthy Malcolm Brogdon you can ever get this year. Obviously, he got hurt in the playoffs, but throughout the regular season, he was as reliable as you can expect from Malcolm Brogdon. So, yeah, I would fully expect Brogdon to be moved. I just don't know that the Suns, now that they have Beal, are the team that would want him. I could see them really, really being in on Marcus Smart, right? Marcus Smart with that team makes a lot of sense because they don't have any point of attack defenders on that squad right now. A Kogi, maybe, but he's not going to guard a point guard, right? Yeah. Marcus Smart is definitely, if I'm the Suns, I'm targeting somebody like Smart. Maybe Peyton Pritchard, as you said. I know there's already been some rumored interest there. Pritchard, as you know, I think he's a much better defender than he's given credit for, especially as a screen navigator and point of attack defender. So Horford makes a lot of sense for them, for sure. They need people.
So let's talk this out real quick.
Okay.
So if you're the Suns, let's say you're trying to get, a 2-for-1, 3-for-1 with DeAndre Ayton. From a Celtics perspective, if they called and they said, hey, we want Marcus Smart, Al Horford, I haven't done the exact math. It gets you close. If it's Horford, Smart for DeAndre Ayton, that's the bulk of the deal. We can throw in second rounders or, whatever we need to, JD Davison's or whatever to make this work. But that's the bulk of the deal. How do you feel about that from Celtics perspective?
That's tough, man. I don't love Ayton. That's the issue. I think Rob Williams, if he was healthier and you could rely on him, I think in a vacuum he's a more impactful defender than Ayton is just as an all-around player. So I think if you're an Ayton guy, you're like, oh, absolutely, I'm doing that. You're like selling high on Marcus Smart. You're selling high on Al Horford. You don't know how much longer Horford's going to be able to play at the level that he played at. And then Smart, you saw a lot of decline in his game this year, although he was awesome in the playoffs. Anybody that's still talking about Marcus Smart not being like a playoff player, he had a couple bad games for the most part. He was the third best player, maybe second best player for the Celtics in the playoffs, and it's kind of not even a debate. So I would probably say no if it's Smart, but if it's Brogdon or if it's Horford, Pritchard, and Gallo, something like that, if that gets you to Ayton, then I'd probably do it. But Horford and Smart, I think that's a little bit too much to give up because that's such a significant part of the Celtics core.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I'm with you. I think if it's Brogdon, it's a game changer because then that would be a pretty easy sell. As to, I mean, listen, DeAndre Ayton's 24 years old. He was a number one pick just a handful of years ago. I think if you had asked this question, after the Suns made their finals run, where Giannis put up some beast numbers, but DeAndre, for what you can do against a guy like Giannis, like DeAndre didn't do horrible. You know what I mean? Despite the numbers, this is one of those like Andre Iguodala slowing down LeBron James in the NBA Finals when he still puts up 30, 10, and 10. But there was a world in which a year and a half, 2 years ago, it looks like DeAndre Ayton's in a much more favorable standing than where he's at right now, and so that's what would make this pill really hard to swallow. I think I'm with you. The Smart Horford combo of this, because I'm not opposed to shaking up the core, because it feels like to a certain degree something's got to give, right? Something has to change. It feels like obviously great steps with adding to the assistant coaching staff that was so barren that really came to fruition, obviously in the postseason. But this core has just been together, and we've seen so many of the same issues that it does feel like there needs to be a tweak. But is Smart and Horford too much of a tweak? And that's where I think it comes down to, like you said, how much do you believe in DeAndre Ayton? Because I think the fact that you could even get him for this package, like I said, didn't seem like that would probably be on the table a year and a half, 2 years ago. And now you could get him potentially for a Brogdon Horford or a Smart Horford combo. Al's 36 years old, 37 years old, whatever he is. Like, But for the Suns, there's a lot of appeal and just, hey, we have two more bodies that we can throw into our rotation and, give us a chance that if we have an injury, we're not just completely depleted. We still have an NBA level team that we can put out there. So I think it's an interesting conversation. It'll be interesting to see if they float DeAndre Ayton, what his value is. I think I ultimately land with you that if it's Brogdon and Horford, I would say yes. Smart and Horford, probably, a little bit too rich for my taste. But with DeAndre Ayton, that does give you some, more stability in that front court with the age of him and Rob, and then potentially, losing Grant Williams, which I think is the next area we should go to here, because Grant's just in the news, man. People want Grant. And I know for me, it's starting to feel, I've been feeling this for the last couple of weeks, or even during the playoffs, especially when he wasn't playing a lot, that this is probably the end of Grant Williams in Boston. Of course, not definitive. He's a restricted free agent. The Celtics can match. But recent reports have had him linked to the Pacers, who we talked about in the last podcast, the Magic, as well as the Mavericks, and potentially the Celtics working on some sign and trade deals that go along with that. So, Greg, for me, and this is going to lead into also the other part that we want to talk about, is each episode we're trying to pick a guy or two across the league who maybe is a good fit for the Celtics, maybe is somebody they should target. And with the sign and trade, I look at these three specific teams, and the Magic and the Pacers both have cap space. So they're really kind of just doing us a favor if they want to do a sign and trade. Maybe it's a second round pick as a show of, good faith. Like, hey, remember this? Maybe down the road we can make something work. Or, I've seen Bobby Manning talk about bringing Daniel Tice back. I'm not really into that idea. We've seen the Tice show. I don't really need to see it for a third time. I think after 2 screenings, I'm good.
Yeah,
like that,
I'm okay.
that movie's played out. So, but to the point of they may want to get off that contract when they bring in Grant. That's the type of asset I think you're going to get back. That leaves Dallas. Dallas is likely, I think, going to pay Kyrie. Whether that's a good idea or not, that's for another show to discuss. I don't really want to fucking deal with that. So whether or not it's a good idea, they'll probably do it. And then that leaves them probably a little bit more strapped for cash. So there's probably a little bit more maneuverability. And so if there is a sign and trade, I got 2 guys I want to throw at you, Greg, just to get your thoughts of who the Celtics could potentially get back. And this, once again, this is kind of similar to DeAndre Ayton. Buy low on guys that have shown the capability to be better than what they've been recently. So the 2 guys that I'm looking at on the Mavericks roster, Reggie Bullock and Maxi Kleber. Your thoughts?
Love Maxi Kleber. I've always been a big Maxi Kleber guy. If you're the Mavs, I think that makes sense because Kleber and Grant have similar skill sets. They both can shoot the 3. Kleber's a much better defender than I think the average NBA consumer would imagine. He's actually pretty good on defense. Grant's 24, 25, whatever Grant is. Kleber's 31, right? So you're just trading in an older model for a newer model. And if you're the Celtics, you're looking at Kleber's contract, and he's 11 million per year through 25, 26. And that's a really good contract. If you have Maxi Kleber through the end of his prime, through 25, 26 at $11 million a year. The only thing with Kleber is he's always hurt. So that's the thing to consider for the Celtics. Reggie Bullock, I think what does he have? Like a player option or a team option this year?
I believe so. Yeah.
Or like no, it says the amount not fully guaranteed. So he's on a not guaranteed deal this year. Okay. So I'd probably be out on Bullock. I've never really been a big Reggie Bullock guy. I think he's super overrated, both as a defender and as a shooter. So I wouldn't want Reggie Bullock, but if you can get Kleber locked in, Grant for Kleber, I think works. I don't know what Grant's number is going to be. I would imagine he's going to make more than 11 million. So if you need to throw in another guy, like,
well, this might not need to be exact is the point because of the sign and trade aspect of it. So this might be just and I don't know, I haven't looked at Dallas's cap sheet, but if they have enough room to absorb it in that $4 to $5 million difference, is what they need to make up. It may just need to be, Kleber straight up. One thing I will say about Maxi Kleber, and this is, I'm with you. You think of him as this, kind of knockdown shooter. He's been pretty bad from the 3-point line over the last 2 years. Part of that potentially injury. I do think the part that you made, the point that you made, about his defense, that is something that a lot of people will just not think of. But when you think about the Mavericks making that Western Conference run, basically at the same time the Celtics were turning it around 2 years ago in their run to the finals, those were the 2 teams.
He was guarding Kawhi.
That's what I'm saying. Maxi Kleber was he was a huge part of that defensive turnaround, along with Dorian Finney-Smith. Reggie Bullock was part of it as well. Those were guys that really stepped up to turn a team that on paper you wouldn't look at and go, man, I bet you these guys are one of the top 5 defenses in the league. And Maxi being healthy was a big part of that. And, but his 3-point shooting, it was 41% in 2020, 2021, 37% the year before. The last 2 years, which have been injury riddled, down to 32 and 34% respectively. So it has been a little bit of a mixed bag. So this is my point of kind of buying low on a guy that maybe they want to move, who has several years left on his contract. And then for Reggie Bullock, I'm actually probably a little higher on Reggie Bullock than you are. I do kind of like that. I do think the Jays could use a 3-and-D type backup, as a guy to just spell some minutes. Just with guarding maybe some of the other, wing players that the Jays are going to be asked to guard. So I do think there's value in a guy like that. And he's been, it's really weird. I was looking at his 3-point shooting numbers. He's got some years where he's had 3 different years where he's over 40%, but he's also got a bunch of years where he's in the mid to low 30s. So it's a little bit of a crap bag of just, I don't know what Reggie Bullock we're going to get, but you would like to think him playing off of the Jays, maybe he gets some more spacing. Then again, he's playing with Luka, so he should be getting some good shots, but heliocentric, it's a little bit difficult to kind of figure out how and when those shots are coming. But I think either of those options, if I'm being honest, if you're going to lose Grant, I think those are 2 options that at least give you back value where you can start to replace the Grant Williams minutes, combine that with Danilo Gallinari coming back. I think you start to be able to say, okay, it sucks that we lost Grant. We like Grant on this show. Not everybody does. We do on this show. I would love to keep Grant, but if we're going to lose him, this is part of that process of piecing it together with other parts of depth that we can still use to fill the void of what Grant Williams is leaving behind.
Yeah, and the other guy on that roster, I just want to throw out Tim Hardaway Jr. I like him. I think his skill set fits better on the Celtics roster than a Bullock. I think Kleber would be my preferred piece to come back, but Tim Hardaway Jr. is like one of the classic shooting guards that's still left.
I've always had a soft spot for Tim Hardaway Jr. I think I just don't think the Mavericks would willingly give him up for a sign and trade. You know what I mean? I think he has a lot of value for them because sometimes he's been their second best player. I mean, with Kyrie there, that won't necessarily be the case, but then that probably puts him to more of a position of where he should be. But actually, that does. I haven't listened to the most recent Bill Simmons podcast, but I have seen this floating around on social media where he presented a trade of Marcus Smart for Tim Hardaway Jr. and the number 10 pick. I feel like that's probably, if I'm the Celtics, I think I would probably do that. I think that's probably a little too rich for Dallas because even if you're not sure about the number 10 pick, we always say we know this is a weak draft. This is a strong draft class. In reality, we don't know shit. We have no idea what's going to happen with that number 10 pick, whether that's going to turn into, Kawhi was number 15, Giannis was number 15, Devin Booker was 10 and beyond, Paul Pierce was number 10. There's plenty of scenarios in which the number 10 pick is really valuable despite what you may think of the draft in the moment. So I think that's probably a trade that's too rich for the Mavericks, but interested on your thoughts because this has been going around Twitter.
The Mavs have been enamored of Smart for a while.
He's a Dallas
Smart
kid
has always kind of been, he's a Dallas kid. He's always been rumored. There was that Jalen Brunson, Marcus Smart rumor a few years back before Brunson really popped. Looking back, it's like, damn, wish Celtics done that.
That's
shit.
Yeah.
That's man, that was there. So Smart to Dallas. Yeah, I could see that happening. Man, it's like whenever I hear we're gonna trade Marcus Smart, I'm like, I'm okay with it. And then I really think about do I want Tim Hardaway Jr. over Marcus Smart? Obviously, the number 10 pick would be in that deal.
Yeah.
But I'd rather have Marcus Smart than Tim Hardaway Jr.
That's straight up. Yeah, that's a pretty easy call. It's the number 10 pick that changes the dynamic of it.
Yeah, and then if you're the Celtics, you probably attach that to something and try and get a bigger piece back, right? The number 10 pick.
Either that or, we talk about the CBA now kicking in. If you hit on that number 10 pick, you're cost controlled with a pretty big asset, for the next at least 4 years until you have to worry about that. So, I think there's a lot of appeal in just getting that pick, keeping it, and trusting that you're gonna hit on that. So I don't know. I think it's a fun conversation. I don't think the Mavericks would do that deal with the number 10 pick, and the Celtics aren't doing it straight up. But let's take a quick break. Greg, I want to get a player from you, and then we'll hit a vibe check before we get out of here. All right, Greg, give me a player that you think the Celtics could target, should target, or interest you.
Well, kind of continuing off of that Grant sign and trade, we didn't talk about the Orlando Magic at all. Just kind of looking at their roster. Fultz, 17 million, be an interesting guy. Wendell Carter Jr. only at 13 million. So if Grant's getting more, I just don't see the Magic trading Wendell Carter Jr. I think he
Yeah,
makes a lot more
and
sense
the
to their
key is they
roster.
have some space here with to be able to sign Grant. So I
Mhm.
don't think they're going to dig into anyone that they value even a little bit. I'm not sure that they're gonna feel the need to move on from.
Well, I mean, they have the space, but the Celtics can always match, right? So if
True,
the if the
that's a
Cel
fair point.
if the Celtics like we're just going to match that, then they would rather work out a sign and trade. Let's see. Gary Harris is someone that has always been kind of floated around as a possibility, but he's only got 1 year left at 13 million.
I feel like Gary Harris belongs in that like John Collins, Miles Turner mode of just like, oh, you need to complete a trade. Have you guys talked to Orlando about Gary Harris? And he never gets moved, but I feel like he's always on the cusp of going somewhere.
And then I mentioned Fultz, another guy that you could buy low on would be Jalen Suggs. Jalen Suggs through 24, 25. So if they're more Fultz guys than Suggs guys and they like what Cole Anthony's bringing to the table, maybe they're like, you know what? Let's get Grant Williams for Suggs, call it a day. Like he didn't work out as a prospect for us. And you know me, I've always been a big Jalen Suggs
Yeah.
guy. So I would like to take a look at him. And then he's like a younger Marcus Smart that probably gives you an opportunity to move off of Smart in a separate deal. So I think those are some names just to throw out there. Any of them, when you hear them, that you're like, yeah, that would be my first choice.
I mean, a lot of those are appealing. I have a hard time because I think the Magic have set their team up so well. I really love what the Magic are doing right now with their roster that I just have a hard time feeling like they're going to move on from a lot of those guys for as much as they might like Grant. I don't know if Grant moves the needle enough that even if the Celtics were to match, they'd be like, listen, like, go ahead and match. We're gonna give him 17 million. You guys really want to give him 17 million? And then the Celtics gotta say they gotta figure out how real their bluff is. That all right, we're gonna match, so give us something.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes it's a game of poker at that point as to who's going to fold first. So I mean, when you mention some of those guys, I'm trying to think of which ones, at least in my opinion, could be realistic fits. Here's a guy that I actually don't really know enough about, but is once again I think a buy low candidate that potentially the Magic might want to move off. A guy like Chuma Okeke, he's a swing. He's someone that once again I think if you bring him in, he's only got 1 year left on his rookie deal. So that's someone that you say, all right, maybe he just needed a different spot, different opportunity. I mean, out of the guys you mentioned, I think Jalen Suggs would be great. I think Jalen Suggs would fit kind of where this team wants to go as far as getting back to that defensive mentality. And, Jalen Suggs had a couple of games last year because you and I got kind of enamored, especially early on in the season with watching Magic on League Pass. It was, the Ouija board was just telling me, watch the Magic, watch the Magic. You'll get that if you're a longtime listener here. But Jalen Suggs had a couple of moments where he closed games. He just straight up closed games out on the offensive side of the ball. And so, we all think back to Jalen Suggs' this time at Gonzaga, that Final Four run, that shot he hit against, I think it was UCLA in the Final Four. And, he's just a big time player. And it's been like you said, it's been a little bit up and down. So I think if that was a guy, if they were like, you know what, we think we're going to move off this. They have 2 picks inside the top 12. They get 6 and 11 this year. Maybe they have another target they want to bring in at the guard position. Cole Anthony's another interesting name, just because I don't know where they see him fitting in. They're a little bit like Celtics. You know what? Now that I'm thinking about this, the Magic really are kind of Celtics junior, right?
Okay.
I mean, you've got the 2 wings. You've got Franz and Paolo. You've got the Jays. You've got kind of a backcourt that's filling up. When you look at Suggs, you look at Anthony, you look at Markelle Fultz. I've always thought Wendell Carter Jr. is a little bit of, Al Horford light to a certain degree. Like there's a lot of similarities now that we're just looking at these rosters, at least to me, that I see between the Magic and the Celtics, which I think the Magic are one of the next up and coming teams in the East.
Yeah. I don't really know where to go from that, but
yeah, I didn't either. I mean, it was something I wasn't planning on saying. I was just looking at this roster and I was like, Jalen Suggs, Marcus Smart. You're right. There is something to that. You look at, they have 3 or 4 guards trying to figure out what is the right fit. They got their 2 wings that they feel established. But so I guess to get this back on track a little bit, I think if Grant ends up going to the Magic, number one, I like that fit for the Magic with them picking up Grant Williams. It's tough to see what the Celtics are going to be able to pull off from the Magic. So I think this would be great for Grant. I don't think this would be a great destination for the Celtics to get something back. This is my final thought on it.
I would be really interested to see Fultz in Boston. I think that would be a lot of fun. Him and Tatum, after being the 2 guys that were traded for each other. I think that'd be a really fun team to watch, especially I think Fultz is more of a classic point guard than exists in today's league. I think he came in with the reputation for being more of like a combo guard, but since his shot has left him to some degree, he's really focused on his defense and his playmaking. So I'd like to see Markelle Fultz in Boston. I think that'd be interesting. And if it was for Grant, yeah, sure, let's do it. Same thing with Jalen Suggs. If we're getting a real asset back for Grant, who is just going to leave, or we're going to have to match like a $17 million a year contract, like you said,
yeah,
whatever we can get back, I think the Celtics need to take, because Grant's going to be a tough piece to lose. So whatever impact player we can get back, I'm down.
Yeah, so we'll find out more on that here as we're leading up to it. Just to kind of set a timeline here, the NBA draft this Thursday, the 22nd. We'll bring Adam in. We'll do a little bit more coverage of the Celtics and their 35th pick coming up on our podcast later this week. And then I think the Celtics need to extend a qualifying offer to Grant Williams by the 28th, I believe is that date. Then that will flip over to the new calendar year on the 30th. We'll have free agency, which starts the 1st, and then officially, I believe, a few days later, you'll be able to start signing guys. So we'll see a lot of movement, a lot of rumors. It's silly season. We'll see a lot of that coming out in the next couple of days. So we'll talk more about that here later in the week. But for this episode, let's cue up a vibe check. All right. Vibe check time, Greg. You already gave us Flapjack Monday. I'm going to let you take the floor here. I don't know if you want to keep going down that road, if you've got something else up your sleeve.
That was one of 3 options that I had written down. So I was going to tell you, I can give you a food option, I can give you a game option, or I can give you just like a general annoyance in life option.
Let's go general annoyance in life.
Okay, this one, it's summertime here in Austin, Texas. It's been unseasonably warm and humid. And
humid is the emphasis too on that.
Yeah, it's like over 100 degrees, threatening to rain every day. You walk outside, you feel like you're walking into soup. And with that, and I love soup, by the way, but soup as
but you don't want to wear soup. You don't want to wear soup.
I don't want to wear soup.
Love eating soup, not wearing soup.
Yeah, and I also don't like cold soups. But
not a gazpacho guy. Okay,
not a gazpacho guy, but I do like cereal, which is basically breakfast soup. Mosquitos. Okay. Mosquitos. I fucking hate mosquitoes, bro. And right now we have because there's like a little bit of a marshland kind of behind my house. We have so many mosquitoes in my yard, and it's driving me fucking nuts because I haven't been going out in my yard because it's very, as I said, very muggy, very humid, but they're getting into the house whenever I open the door. So every single time I'm just like hanging out in my house, inevitably I'm like, fuck, I just got bit, and it's normally on my face or on my cheek or on my neck. It's a really frustrating spot to get bit. And I have always really had an adversarial relationship with mosquitoes. They like my blood for whatever reason it is. I can remember back in high school attending, I think it was Lily Panna, shout out Lily Panna, her graduation party. And there were just mosquitoes everywhere. And I literally spent the entire time not hanging out with people, but just trying to kill mosquitoes. And I was like going around. I must have looked like a fucking nutcase, just going around the party, just like trying to kill mosquitoes off of other people and stuff. And I was completely sober. I just don't like mosquitoes. But there's too many mosquitoes right now. Danielle has gone out and got these things called mosquito dunks, which apparently are, I don't know what they are, but there's some sort of chemical you put in water, and it attracts the mosquitoes and it kills the larvae and kills the adults. So I'm hoping that in about a week or two, the mosquito problem is gone in my yard. But right now, not vibing with mosquitoes. Don't like them. Want them all dead.
I'm curious to know who would like to be on the other side of that argument. Man, you don't like mosquitoes? I love mosquitoes. I would love to know who would oppose. Yeah, okay, yeah, I guess. I'm talking about from a human perspective, I guess. But no, I'm with you. I have the same issue in my backyard right now. It's anytime, I mean, it's getting so hot and humid that I don't really want to sit in my backyard anyways. But this has been a problem for the last month and a half, maybe, even when it still wasn't quite, hitting the mid-90 temperatures that we deal with down here in Austin, Texas. And it was like, oh, I'm going to sit outside for a little bit. I'm going to, have my coffee, or maybe I'll bring my laptop, do a little bit of work. And no matter the spray, like within 5 minutes, like I got to get out of here. I'm just getting eaten alive. And, my girlfriend, Lorena, when she gets bit, she definitely has some type of allergic.
She gets the welts.
But she gets the welts. Yeah. So it's like instantaneous. Like she'll be like, I felt it on my shin. And within 5 minutes, she'll be like, Will, come look at this. And it's, it's the size of half a golf ball or something. I'm like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Like, it's like kind of scary, actually. Like, it looks like she's going to break out in hives. But yeah, it's a real problem right now. I don't know the exact trap that you're talking about that Danielle's getting, but I know we've tried some stuff like that where, there's like this spray that emits and it like, you put it on the table so that you can like, they don't come bother you. Now it only has a certain radius that it hits.
Yeah.
So I don't know how far the spray that you guys are getting going. I also
So
have
it's
one.
not a spray, right? So
No, it's not a spray.
what this is, it's like you basically create like a mini pond, right? So you put this chemical within the water and
Mm-hmm.
it's attractive to the mosquitoes. So mosquitoes breed in water,
Yeah.
right? So they come into the water and they lay their eggs in this little trap, and the chemicals kill the eggs. And then also it's supposed to be bad for the adult mosquito. So it kills the eggs from them
Okay.
just multiplying, and also supposed to kill. It's like a roach trap basically in your house, right? Where the roaches come in, they eat something and they go back to their nest and they infect their entire nest. It's supposed to be the same concept. We only have one right now in our backyard. We have another one, but we don't have the container for it because you just like have to get your own container. We need to set it up in the front because the front porch is, I think, where they get in the house.
Yeah, mosquitoes suck, man. I was also just thinking, like, I wonder if does PETA protect mosquitoes the way they protect other like real
No.
animals? Okay, good.
Mosquitoes,
I was wondering if we're gonna.
nuisance.
I was like, are we gonna lose some listeners who are like, I can't believe those goddamn mosquito podcasters? But yeah, I can't imagine anyone that's really trying to take the side of pro mosquito. So I'm with you. Mosquitoes suck. They're always a problem, and they're really bad right now where we live. All right, my vibe check of the week. So, we talked about in the last episode, I came back from a little vacation down in Puerto Rico. We were with my girlfriend's, a bunch of her friends that are from Puerto Rico. So it was really cool getting to like, go to this place I've never been to before, but have locals kind of show you around. Now, my Spanish is este no bueno. So a lot of them speak English as well, but one of the things that, and I should learn more Spanish. It's a whole blocker thing. Working on it in therapy. Don't worry about it. It's not the point of this. But the part of it that was really nice is by nature, and obviously we have a podcast, so this should be pretty apparent. I like to be the center of attention. I like to, be the guy that can make. I mean, Greg, we grew up in a culture, I guess, like a friendship culture where it's like who can get the biggest laugh. And most of the times it's whoever shouts the loudest. So everyone's shouting over one another. Everyone's vying
Shout out, Mark.
Yeah, everyone's vying for who can get the biggest laugh. What's the story that sticks. And so when you factor in that, I work in sales, it's my full-time job. I'm talking all the time. We do the podcast and I'm very social. And so it's just part of my nature. So I do enjoy it, but it's really nice sometimes when you go to an area or you go to, for this case on vacation, where I don't feel the need to do that. And I actually get to just sit back and kind of observe. And honestly, just shutting the fuck up for a little bit, that's my vibe check. Because it's actually really nice. It's really nice to sit back, and I could do this more often. I'm sure some people in my life would be like, "Yeah, you should take this advice, not just when you're around people who speak a different language, but just in general, you should probably do this more often." And they might not be wrong, but I think for me, I need that barrier of entry to be able to actually let myself just kind of sit back, be observant, and then I think it also refreshes me a little bit for like coming back to the podcast, like. I wasn't even going to be on the last show, but I was like, you know what? I think I got the time. And I had just, verbally a lot of energy. I was like, all right, I got a lot to say. I've been thinking a lot about, what do I feel about the Jaylen Brown Supermax? And I felt like I had a great show. I felt like I had a great show last time. I'm not going to lie. I felt refreshed. I felt like I came in with some good opinions. I had some good stuff to back it up. And so I think sometimes just taking a step back, shutting the fuck up, reflecting, I think it has a lot of great benefits. That's
I can think of more than a few times where you probably needed to shut the fuck up.
Like I said, I'm sure this applies in other scenarios, but by my nature, that's just really difficult for me and not something that I typically do. And so when being forced to do it, like I said, now I see the benefits to it. So maybe I'll try to add it into other parts of my life. Probably not, but maybe.
Yeah, you're definitely between the two of us, you're the more social being. I tend to kind of like lay in the cut a little bit more than you, just like in a social environment, which doesn't really make sense because I'm the one who like performs and like is in a band and is like literally the center of attention when I'm in the band. But yeah, but hanging out with you and hanging out with like Mark McDonough and all the kids from Dorchester that we hung out with growing up, like Colin Dwyer, these guys that are like super, super forceful personalities, almost like it's like an alpha personality, but they're not alpha energy. You know what I mean? Like everyone's just, as you said, vying for attention, vying for the biggest laugh. And for
it's
me,
not like we're trying to prove anyone's better than anyone. It's not not that type of like alpha mentality, but it's just, I'm going to get a bigger laugh than you, and I have it right now, and I don't give a shit if you're talking. I'm going to talk over you because my laugh is better than your laugh.
Yeah, and it's so funny because Charles, my brother, shout out Charles, whenever we would come over when Charles and I were roommates for that little bit period of time,
like a year or so,
he would always be like, dude, your friends, like, they can't come over, dude. They're way too fucking loud. It's just because it's you and Mark. It's mostly just you and Mark just shouting over each other. And then me and Chris just kind of giggling and waiting for our moment to say our joke. It's like Chris, it's like a spectrum, right? Chris is the quietest. I'm the next quietest. Then you, and then Mark. Like Mark by far is the loudest, but you guys are normally the ones that are kind of vying for that biggest laugh in the crew.
Yeah, that's I can't combat that. I think that's very accurate, but that's why it's my vibe check. Every once in a while, it's good to just shut the fuck up. So that's going to do it for this episode of Green with Envy. As always, we appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you are following us across all of our social medias. Check us out on YouTube. We're going to have a lot more reels coming out. We'll have some more videos on Twitter. So make sure you guys are following us across all of those social media fields. Greg, any final thoughts? And let us know what we're going to hear on the way out.
No final thoughts. Black Sheep Optimist, new release, Questions and Lies. Peace, everybody.
Peace.